Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hotdish podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is What's Hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz McGlennon, and Ashley Steiner.
Oh, I got a piercing.
Oh.
You see it?
Yeah, did it hurt?
Yes.
Wait, so you can't do vaccines, but you can do that?
I didn't say I got my vaccine.
No, but you're afraid of vaccines.
I'm not afraid of it. I don't like needles in
but
general.
You can pierce your ear there.
Yes, but that's gonna help with my migraine. Like there's a lot. I have 7 piercings, Liz. Like I get shots, I get vaccines. I like to complain about it.
I just don't understand how you're afraid of needles, but you have no problem with piercings.
I don't have no problem with piercings. It's not the needle that I'm afraid of. It's like the piercing of the skin, because even like IVs bother me. Okay. So like just things piercing my skin in general. Like it's not, I say needles because that's way easier to explain.
Okay.
But like it's actually just like the whole idea of piercing, like the skin grosses me out. And like, because like I had an IV in once. Okay.
If that's not a fear of needles, then what is a fear of needles?
No. I agree that but it's more than needles. Like an IV is not a needle. They're like, because like they were like, oh, the needle's out. Like it's just the IV. Think of it as like a straw. And I was like, yeah, that's not helping. So, but yeah, like I couldn't watch like what she was doing. Well, obviously I couldn't anyways. But like when my friend got it, like I didn't watch her get hers done. I just get my head down.
Sure. So it's supposed to help with migraines?
Yeah, so it's called a daith piercing, and so like you get it on the same side that you get migraines on, but so my migraines just moved to the left side, so we'll see if they go back to the right now.
Could you get it both sides pierced?
Yeah, but there was no way I was doing them both in one day after getting the first one.
It hurt.
Second most painful thing I've ever done to my body, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's a sensitive area.
Because it's like full cartilage and it's like thick, and it's like they say the closer to your eardrum you get, like the more things hurt. Merlin's face right now.
I only have my one like regular earring piercing.
Yeah, I have 7 piercings in total.
No gracias. I don't like any of those things. I don't have any piercings.
I know my dad was like, I don't understand the whole masochist thing of like poking holes in yourself. And I was like, well, it's not like that. I mean, like the one, my earlobes didn't hurt or anything, but like I would never have gotten, like I was done with tattoos and piercings, but if it helps with my migraines.
I'm assuming that you would never try acupuncture then because of your fear of needles.
You know, what's funny is I've never done acupuncture, but I've done needling, like at a physical therapy office where they like, you have tight muscles. So they literally put a needle into your muscle and work it out.
How is that different?
It's not. And as I'm getting older, my fear of needles is getting better. Like I will say, like, you know, because sometimes, like I said, like the pain is just not worth like not getting the needle, I guess.
Well, and the reason I ask, I don't have migraines, but I've heard from people that do that acupuncture can help.
So that's actually the acupuncture point for migraines.
Oh, okay.
Where I got
Interesting.
the piercing. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep.
Huh.
One of the acupuncture, but the other one is here. I'm not getting that pierced though.
Seems like it would be somewhat inconvenient.
I just hold it when I get migraines. Squeeze it.
Do you know what you should do? They have like little sticky things you can do at home, like at home acupuncture, and you could just put one right there.
Interesting.
If I see you in person, I have some and I'll give you some. And they don't hurt. They're like little
start pinching inside my ear. Sorry, Merlin and I were like having a total side conversation there, Liz.
And here I'm trying to give you sticky acupuncture needles.
I will take any advice that people have. Migraines are the worst.
Today's episode is sponsored by acupuncture sticky pads.
If only. That'd be awesome. So I guess we can go ahead and get started talking today about our topic. You guys ready?
So ready.
Yeah. So career paths inside of the Dynamics 365 Power Platform world. I know when I was entering it, I was not intentionally, like when I entered the workspace, I was not intentionally going into this kind of technology. So I didn't really have a career path at the time. So intrigued to hear like how that's changed and developed over the last, 10 years, 15 years since Dynamics and Power Platform has become prominent. What are your guys' initial thoughts on getting, having your career path?
Well, I was in a similar boat to you, Ashley, where I accidentally got into this space. So like I never like had a plan of like this is what my career path should be. And I guess I just kind of figured it out as I went. And there's just a lot of options. And I think if you're newer to the space, it probably would help to talk to people about like what the options are. Because I think a lot of times you might be given advice like you have to follow the strict path of like you have to start in delivery and be a consultant and go like junior, regular, senior, whatever. But like that's a traditional career path for a consultant in delivery, but like that's not the only option. And so if that doesn't seem appealing to you, like that's okay. And there's plenty of other routes to go.
It's true. So I made a whole list, as I was telling you both. I made a whole list, and I broke it down between consulting and end user and ISV. Anybody who's unfamiliar with ISVs, we did an episode about that a few episodes ago. But I thought like all three of these are a little bit different in the ways in which, like in the roles that are available, in the things that you can do there. And I'm actually realizing as I'm looking down this list and thinking about Liz's career path, and I was like, oh, I left sales off here entirely. Like I left off the fact that you don't even have to stay in the technology. You can go into sales.
So did you leave sales and pre-sales off?
Yeah, it looks like I did.
Which is pretty ironic because you were in pre-sales for how long?
I know. You're not wrong. But I was trying to think like, okay, if I wanted to stay like actively working with the technology, so I was like, okay, there's all these different like consulting levels. And then, well, I'll just go down my list if you don't mind. Is that okay? Can I go down my list?
And we have to make sure to come back to the sales topic though, since it's not on your list.
So I'm thinking like from the consulting side, like you've got functional consultants, which are the people that are like doing the point and click config. You've got more technical consultants or developers, which are like maybe writing code. You've got data consultants that are like doing data moving, integrations, migrations, stuff like that. If you want to get really deep into data, you could actually like sort of springboard from there into data science and then get more into a lot of the Microsoft like data science things like customer insights, the machine learning, the AI, going BI, kind of do all that sort of under data. But if you decide you don't actually want to work with the technology that directly, you can go into like business analysis and just focus on gathering requirements. You could go into like UI or UX to work on like user experience,
project management.
Change management. You do graphic design. You get into project management. You could be a scrum master. And then of course you can like escalate up the chain and become like team lead or, like somebody who coaches consultants, somebody who handles escalations.
I think one of the important things that people don't realize in this space is that it might look like a lateral move, even though you're like moving your knowledge or expertise up, right? So in all those positions, I don't want to say that they're all equal, they're all lateral, but it's not like a traditional path where you go from being a contributor to then a manager. You might still just be a contributor, but it's a different level of contribution. I actually started my partner list with support. You might actually just be on the support team and handling different cases and then work your way up to being a consultant while you're still an individual contributor. It's a very different level of expertise and knowledge that you have to have.
Or you could go like if your support team has tiers, like you might start with the easiest tickets or cases, but then go to like a senior support engineer, like the higher tier where you're doing, working on the harder stuff or managing the support team. So yeah, like you can move laterally or you can move up kind of within the team that you're on.
I feel like it's sort of more, it might be a little bit more similar to like a medical space where you could be like a generalist or you could like sort of hone in on a specific area and sort of become a specialist. And sort of similarly to medical things, like specialists tend to be more highly paid than generalists. But that of course doesn't mean you can't still make a very comfortable living as a generalist.
So
I feel like there's a lot of
I had that, I had that on my list of like, should you pick an area to specialize in. And I guess there's probably pros and cons to both. I don't think like being a generalist in our space necessarily means that you're paid less. I think it's just a different type of role, and it's going to be like what's more appealing to you. How do you guys feel?
I agree, because like I think of people that do field service. That is such a unique part of like the whole stack that we work with, that like it's hard to be a generalist inside of all of Dynamics 365 and also no field service. Like they're completely two different animals. So so I think that picking a specialty depending on the specialty is actually really beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like with the breadth of the platform, you sort of have to pick some areas that you're going to kind of specialize in, because if you try to maintain like a reasonable level of expertise across the entire platform, like that's going to be hard to keep up.
Yeah, I agree. I guess when I was thinking generalist, like you're gonna still have areas that you're stronger in, but you at least have like a high level understanding of all areas of the system. Like I guess I've worked with people that are like, I only do field service and I don't know, I can't touch the rest of the system.
Yeah.
Like that to me is a specialist versus like I prefer field service, but I can do sales service or marketing or XRM or these other things. It's just not my strength. And I see both types of people out there consulting, and I think both work. It's just, again, like, what's your preference? And do you want some variety, or do you want just to completely focus on one thing?
And I think to Merlin's point, it's getting harder to know enough about each of those areas. Like not maybe customer service, marketing, sales. I mean, I think that is like the core, right? The core system, you can still keep up with that. But then adding things like Power Automate, Power Apps, Canvas apps. I mean, there's no way for somebody to know enough about all of that to be able to work on it all the time. So I think that sometimes, so I mean, maybe you know enough about Canvas apps, but it's not like you could build one or something.
Right,
so
right. But that
able to work with a customer.
That all depends on the role you're in, right? Like I think you're both assuming that the role we're talking about is I'm going to build this role. And there's so many roles out there where you aren't delivery or you're not the functional consultant.
See, and that's actually when I was thinking about specialization, I was actually thinking more like less dynamic specific and more like Microsoft Stack inclusive. So like when I'm thinking about a specialist, I'm thinking like a data scientist or like somebody who's focusing on like BI and analytics. And maybe that represents itself as you're building stuff in Power BI. But really your expertise is in digging into and understanding and uncovering insights within data. And at that point, you could be essentially technology agnostic and still be able to do sort of that specialization, or like user experience. You could like extend that all the way down into like designing what a UI should look like, and you can apply that to Canvas apps, for example, but you could also apply it to other things if you, I don't know, got tired of Canvas apps. I wanted to add too, the reason that I put ISV on the list is because I was thinking, well, ISVs and consultancies are very similar, but in an ISV environment, you've also got the ability to go to like a product manager and focus on guiding product development. Obviously, they've got lots of similar roles to consulting companies as well. But I was thinking, this made me think then as sort of as the springboard into the end user. It's like, oh, a product manager. I was like, oh yeah, well, if I'm thinking about an internal admin, then that makes me think about product managers, reference previous episodes. But ISVs have a little bit different perspective there.
Yeah, and I'll say that one of the things that I always thought about going over to the consultant was that you had to get technical. Like I was like, oh, to move up, you either have to become a manager or you have to become a developer, and you have to really understand how things are built. And that's not true at all.
There are so many non-technical roles.
There are so many. I mean, you even think of like you mentioned project management. You just need to have a base understanding of what the system does in order to manage all of these projects and work with consultants, developers. You don't have to necessarily be the technical person yourself. Now, it obviously helps, I would say, to understand as much about the technology as you can, but so I also thought that was nice, is that there's like this whole career path where you don't have to like go learn coding or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with project managers that don't know the system at all, and that's not ideal, but they do get by. But yeah, like there's project management. I mean, Merlin touched on these, change management, training, sales. There's lots of roles that, or you could be a marketer at a partner and like you're marketing the services, but you're not touching the technology itself at all. Like there's so many other supporting roles where you're not the technical person like building the solution.
Well, I think that sales is like probably a good one to segue into based on that, because obviously a salesperson is not going to be the most technical. But as a salesperson, you also have to be able to speak the language that people, you know, what they're asking for and what the system can do. In addition to building demos, like translating those requirements then to pre-sales. I will say is the pre-sales people that I've worked with at companies tend to be the people that know the solution the best. I don't know if that's true everywhere, if that's just the impression I had, but it's like, but every partner I've ever worked with, working at a partner, the pre-sales people were like the ones where you're like, oh, I wish you were still a consultant so you could help me like build this out, because they just knew so much about what you could do.
I think
they've done it all.
I think it varies maybe depending on the partner, but yeah, typically they're the more like technical, product knowledgeable salespeople.
I mean, I want to caveat that with they have to know more about the functionality, because they're sort of at that intersection point, right? Of, oh, you have these problems. Let me see how I can solve that with technology and then show you a potential way to do that. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're like deep into the details, right? Like you've got like your delivery, like solution architects who can say, well, this platform is great, but if you try to do this, or if you try to do that, like you're actually going to run into a problem. And here's the sort of workaround you need to do, or like, yeah, but that's not, you know, whatever that is isn't actually like good above 1,000 users. It starts to like have performance problems. Pre-sales people don't care or know about any of that stuff, right?
Pre-sales people don't actually make it work. They just
want to make
know that
demo
it can.
Yeah.
Yes, it just has
Demo
it just
magic.
works in the demo. Yeah. Demo. Thank you, demo magic. Well, and I always think that like pre-sales, they know a lot or a little about a lot, right? They know like enough to make them dangerous, and but those people are really valuable because they can kind of see things from a more simplistic model sometimes. Sometimes I think that when I would dive in, I'd be like, oh, like you said, like over 1,000 users are getting in super deep, where the pre-sales person is like, I just want to make it work for now.
Right. That's your ultimate generalist spot, really, is the pre-sales.
But some pre-sales people do focus on, like, do specialize.
Sure. But again, you can't, to your point before, you can't focus only on, well, I can only demo field service, because if you're in a situation where the customer needs field service and something else, you have to be able to show both. So you can't, like, certainly you can specialize in a specific area, but you can't specialize in that at the elimination of all the other.
Or you can specialize on an industry in pre-sales or delivery. Like, I'm going to do just healthcare or financial services or agriculture or whatever. Like, those are all different options for specialization as well.
It's true. And those are really helpful because then you learn the right business language.
Right. You don't have to relearn all the terminology every time you talk to a different prospect or client. Yeah,
exactly.
So one, I think, common misconception that I hear a lot is that there are no entry level roles into sales. And I don't think that's true. I think if you want to be a direct seller, like the entry level roles I've seen are like inside sales, where you start on the phone. And I do know, like, and Merlin, you might want to talk to this, but like entry level pre-sales roles also exist. So like those are both options if you're newer to the space as well. And I just don't know if people really realize that.
It's true. I think entry-level pre-sales, I don't know how common those positions are. I know that very intelligent people who run pre-sales teams, such as myself, saw the value in making an entry-level kind of pre-sales position, because it's not that different from like an entry-level consulting position. Like mostly what I had a couple of people come through a position like that. And mostly what it was, okay, here's a demo that needs to be built. Like, this is what I want to show. Here's the story, build it out in a system. And so they get kind of practice, comfort with the system, at the same time getting comfortable with how do you tell a story through the use of the technology. And then you just sort of start bringing them in more and more into their own opportunities until they're like, yeah, I'm comfortable. I can I can talk to the customer, I can build the demo, I can do it all end to end. And now you're like full scale pre-sales. And then from there, you can jump into direct selling, you can stay in pre-sales. Theoretically, you could even go into consulting again if you wanted to. So yeah, I feel like that's maybe the thing that people don't necessarily realize is, especially at a consulting company, once you get in and get like a certain level of comfort with the platform and with your company, you can kind of move around to anywhere you want.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be in a particular order. Like you can kind of
Nope.
change whenever you want to.
Yep.
Well, that was my point with like the lateral moves, right? So like I know a lot of people are like, oh, I want to move up. In our space, you are moving up while having a lateral position because you're learning more, you're taking in more. So I mean, I've done that before where you just, it seems like a lateral position, but you're going to be learning and doing so much more in the next role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen people go from consulting to sales to pre-sales to education, back to consulting, back to sales. Like, it's fine. You can move around.
So that, like, I don't know, that's a really good overview of the partner side, but not everybody wants to work at a partner. I'm probably one of those people. I've traditionally liked to stay on the end user side. And I think that I'm going to just be honest and give you my opinion. That career path is even more confusing to me than a partner, because there's no direct, once you become an admin, where do you go from there?
It's a good question.
This is great advice too. I'm just going to sit and take notes.
Well, I would say, I think it depends on if you want to remain an individual contributor or if you want to be a people manager.
That's true. That's a good distinction. But even if you want to stay as an individual contributor, like you can still go similar directions that you can go in a consulting firm, right? Like you can focus on like staying just the administrator or the product owner or product manager for your Dynamics or Power Platform implementation. But you can also like decide to become a little bit more technical and maybe move more into development. Or you could decide to, if the organization is large enough, like you could do a lot of the sort of change management, project management, user experience, business analysis, like any of those sorts of things would still apply in a big company. And so you can kind of shift around between them. I guess if the organization isn't that big, then maybe not.
So I was going to say, I think you could be a CRM admin or let's say a product owner, product manager. But if you're at a smaller company with, not as many users and maybe a fairly simple deployment of the system, like that's an easier CRM admin job. But if you go to a large organization with, let's say, thousands or tens of thousands of users and a very complex deployment, maybe a whole team that you're working with, but maybe not managing, like there's plenty of product managers that aren't people managers. Like that is technically the same job title, but like the complexity and the challenges I think are totally different. And so again, like Ashley, to your point about consulting, it might look like a lateral move, but you could be gaining totally different skill sets and kind of challenging yourself by going to the more complex, larger environment.
And I agree with that because like every time, and I'll just speak from my own experience, right? Every admin position I've had is so different. I mean, nobody works the same. I've never worked in the same industry twice. So I've also had to learn a new industry every time I go work somewhere. So somewhere new. So that is also, I would say, just in addition to the challenge of going from 30 users to 500 to whatever the number is, also learning that the way people work, I mean, salespeople do not sell the same way across industry. And I specialize, I would say, in sales.
That's true.
Yeah. I was thinking for the smaller organization, I feel like your growth path, again, if you don't want to manage people, is to take on more products, right? Like add more products that sort of fall under your umbrella. So if you have a relatively simple Dynamics deployment, then maybe you take like, okay, well now I'm going to manage not just Dynamics for sales, but I'm going to take on, I don't know, some of our other business applications, the whole Microsoft stack, or everything that runs the business in software, and sort of move yourself closer to like a CIO, CTO sort of role, but maybe without having to manage the people, or just manage the people.
Not everyone
And I
wants
think-
to manage people, Merlin.
I know.
I'll
Just
say
saying.
I think that's the biggest difference between being on the partner and the end user side, is that eventually you're going to just keep making lateral moves on an end user unless you start to manage people and you become like somewhere like an IT manager, IT director, systems man, whatever you want to call that position, and you don't take on more products. I mean, at some point there's no upward movement if you're not going to manage people, whereas I would say in a partner, you can still continue to move up without managing.
It's probably true. That's probably why there are lots of people who move between end users and partners and back again, right? Like you hang out as an admin, and then you decide, actually, I want to spread my wings and fly, and you go to a consulting firm, and you're like, actually, I don't like this hopping from project to project nonsense, and then you go back to an admin.
Mm-hmm. Merlin just described my life, I think.
Not just yours, though. I know other people who've done the same thing as well. I guess I feel like, and maybe this is heretical to go outside the Microsoft stack, but I feel like the same sorts of skills that you would gain managing a Dynamics deployment, for example, could apply to managing, I think, really any software that any business is running themselves on. Maybe to a lesser degree, like an ERP platform. Like if you don't know anything about accounting or finance, that might be a little bit trickier. But like I think you could pretty easily take the same skills of being a Dynamics admin and decide to be a Salesforce admin. But you could also take on, I don't know, like whatever else your company might use. If you get just bored with the technology, but want to keep doing essentially the same sorts of things.
Yeah, you would just have to relearn the nuances of the technology and learn their lingo and their terminology. But
Right.
Yeah, other than that, they're similar.
Yeah, I agree, because I think depending on who you work with in your Dynamics deployment, like I work with sales, but if you're working with marketing and customer service, like maybe looking at all the other systems that they use, like maybe your marketing automation is not part of your Dynamics. It's a great time to start figuring out why and should you move them in. Same with like your customer service, maybe they're also using Zendesk. So I just think, like to your point, Merlin, if you really specialize in that, industry, or if you like just if that's the only team using Dynamics, find out what else they're working on and how you can bring it in. I like to just hold everything close like this, so I would do that. But I think that's an admin's role, is to understand how the organization works as a whole and try to bring everything into like one like fluid motion.
Right. See, and I feel like that vision is what I imagine in my mind a CIO does. Like whether or not the CIO is managing a team of like 30 network admins or whatever, is the role of the CIO, is to say, well, we have this business problem that we need to solve. How can we leverage technology, whether we own it already or not, to solve that problem? And I feel like as a Dynamics admin, you're in that unique position to leverage the whole Power Platform and to help the decision makers understand how the technology can fit that role. And so then, to your point, you can sort of like take out more and more and more until you're encompassing the whole business.
Yeah.
Like it's all
it's so funny, when I first became an admin, I thought the only like the highest thing that you could go to is a CTO. Like, because a CTO in my mind has like one foot in the business and one foot in IT, and like really, and like what you just said, is tries to solve those business problems with technology. Now I might be reading that completely incorrect, but I mean, I kind of just figured that was like the ultimate path, and taking over the world, one dynamic system at a time. But that's not true. I mean, you'd have to manage people, teams. I mean, it's not for everybody.
Sure.
So can I bring up 2 career options we haven't talked about yet?
Yes, and then I have one as well. Liz,
Okay.
Go ahead.
So Microsoft and independent consulting.
Yeah, but independent consulting is just consulting, just all by yourself.
It's still an option that we
It is.
haven't brought up.
I would say it's really different. I mean, it's different than consulting because like you're the salesperson, you're the pre-sales, you are the consultant. I mean, you're kind of doing everything. And Liz, I think you could speak to that a lot more simply, not have me sit here and defend what you do. But
yeah,
you
like have to be comfortable.
Yeah,
you have to be comfortable wearing all the hats, like finding the work, writing the SOW, reading the agreements, and like your legal, your sales, you're managing your LLC, and you're paying your taxes. So you're all like, yeah, you're consulting, but you're doing all the different parts of like running the business with it. Even if it's just a 1-person shop, like you still have to do that stuff. And some people don't want to figure that out. Like, how do I find work and market myself and all that? So
sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it's not like someone's gonna be like, here's a project to go be a functional consultant or whatever on it. Like, you have to do all the work around it too.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
It's really not that bad though.
Sounds like a lot of work. And then
it's a very valid option. I think the biggest downside of independent is like you're not a full-time employee anywhere, and so you don't get benefits.
So that's the biggest thing.
So just figuring out, figuring out benefits, like setting up a 401k through your LLC, figuring out health and dental and all that, like that I think is one of the scariest parts. But it's totally doable, like no matter what your situation. And I know people that just buy independent consultants that just buy healthcare on the open market, and like that's fine. So you just have to, it's a different way of thinking about kind of compensation as a package.
Yeah, and I also think that is like brings out the entrepreneurial side of dynamics, right? So, as admins, we're always kind of alone anyways in an organization, unless you're working somewhere huge where there's like a team to manage it. I've unfortunately never really been part of that. I've always kind of been just me or maybe one other person. So you're already kind of being an entrepreneur trying to sell everybody else on the system and that kind of thing. So not to say that it's exactly the same as being an independent consultant, but it can directly tie, I would say, between the two.
Yeah.
The benefits thing is the one that scares me the most, Liz. So Microsoft is another good path we haven't talked about. That was a good thing to bring up, Liz.
It's true.
How would you say you get in at Microsoft, or why would somebody want to move over to Microsoft?
I mean,
you guys both paused and I was like, oh no.
No, I don't know who wants to talk first. Merlin, you start.
Like maybe there isn't a reason.
I feel like, so Microsoft, I think Microsoft is a good growth path if you are on the technical consulting side, or just more generally technical overall. They have their own support teams. They have their own field engineers. They've also got MCS, the Microsoft Consulting Services, which is basically just a partner under the Microsoft name. So they have, I feel like, a lot of those same, like similar consultant roles, but they also have an incredibly large sales force with sort of your more pre-salesy roles and your more salesy roles. And I think it's a good option if you wanted to try more into the sales arena, or if you wanted to expand more into the pre-sales arena, just because I think you get a little bit better access to like the resources that Microsoft has available. Like if you are a solution architect, a small consultant, and you run into a problem and you think it's a bug in the platform, like it might be kind of annoying or problematic to find the right person at Microsoft to confirm whether or not it's a bug. Whereas if you aren't working for Microsoft in that same position, like you probably have a direct line to the product team and you can actually get some answers that way. Yeah. Or you can go to their support team, which I guess is another path as well. They have a very large support team.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think you have to live in Fargo anymore to be part of it.
I'll say one of the things that you didn't mention is like they have the CSM, so the customer success managers. Yeah. That's a huge role at Microsoft too. So maybe if you're not as technical, but you still love the product, or maybe you're an admin or a consultant, I would say a CSM is a really good role. I've actually met CSMs who have never worked with Dynamics. And then I know CSMs who grew up being a consultant and kind of worked their way up through the partner and then decided to go to Microsoft. So it's really just about building that relationship with their customers. So if you like people, I would say that is a good role for you. So that's one I will never apply for.
I think the CSM role too, you have to be comfortable, like again, kind of wearing a lot of hats. And like I know like talking to leadership and potentially like kind of the CVP level at large companies, but then also like it's getting there by, but also like driving adoption of the system and like making sure that like they're using the licenses that they've purchased. So like I view that role as a really kind of broad role where you kind of have to have a lot of general knowledge in order to kind of adapt to all those scenarios.
So for anyone who doesn't know, that's customer success manager.
I said that. Oh, did I not say that?
I don't know if you did.
Oh.
I would define that role as the product evangelist.
So that was the role I was going to bring up that we haven't talked about as a product evangelist. I've seen those pop up now.
I think those are different roles though, Marilyn.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, so the CSM's job, as you said, is to grow usage within one of their customers.
Yeah, they're assigned an account list. You're kind of like sales plus user adoption plus practice director, like rolled into one. That's my view of a CSM.
Yeah, because you also have to stay up to date with like the new features to be like, hey, you should get this, knowing what you have deployed. This I could recommend to you, that kind of stuff.
How is that not evangelism?
And that was going to be my question to you guys is, how would you define a product evangelist? So, you talk to people and they're like, oh, I'm the product evangelist for Dynamics in my company. I have no idea what that means or what they do.
So at Microsoft or at a company?
Either.
So at Microsoft, I feel like they're not, my perception, maybe this is wrong, is that they're not assigned specific accounts, but just maybe an industry. And they're trying to go out and like market how the product, like show how the product can help the businesses in that industry. But maybe my perception of the role is incorrect.
I mean, I think you could look at it as a more marketing sort of position, like pushing out, here's what the product could do for you in your industry or your platform needs or whatever. Inside a company, I feel like a product evangelist is not that different in my mind from like the product owner, right? Or from that sort of enhanced theorem admin position where it's like if you're trying to take over more departments, right? Like, okay, we got Zendesk over here doing support. I can do that in Dynamics. It would be better if I did it in Dynamics. Here's why it would be better if I did it in Dynamics. Trying to convince the support manager to give up on Zendesk and move into Dynamics is evangelism in my mind. Like it's trying to convince them like, yeah, I know Zendesk does these cool things, but look, I can do the same things and I can do these other things. And then we get all these other benefits of being on the same platform. And that's evangelizing in my mind. So there's you're moving up from an admin without having to see more people.
That's awesome. So any final thoughts from you guys on the career path or options for people?
I don't know. My final thought is once you get into business technology, I think you can go anywhere that you want. And I think that if you go into anywhere in the dynamic space thinking that you have some sort of predefined path ahead of you, you're probably cutting yourself off from options that might actually make you happier.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hotdish podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.